Hey guys, so today we're looking at a video called Ancient Rome in 20 Minutes by Arzamas? So, yeah, we've covered so much Rome on this, channel's history that I'm really looking forward and seeing just how this is explained and what aspects of Rome if he's gonna try to go over. So yeah, I don't really have much else to say other than we should probably get to it, If you want to watch the original video by this creator, the link is down in the description down below, literally the first link you'll see. And if you enjoy my content and want to help out my channel, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. It would really help out my small but humble channel grow, and I would appreciate it very much. With that said, and now without any further ado, let's get to it, shall we? Let's learn about ancient Rome in not one, not two, but 20 minutes.
Here are the letters the Romans gave us. And here are the countries whose languages derive from Latin. Today
Oh, wow.
they cover half the world. As for the ancient Romans, the boundaries of their state encompassed their entire civilization. The Roman peace, or Pax Romana, serves as the first example of globalization. Let's take a walk across 12 centuries of the Roman history. And yes, those numerals are also a Roman legacy.
Yeah, Rome affected the world tremendously, especially here westward, from the Mediterranean onward, even in America. Like, Rome's legacy, I've said before that I think Rome is probably the most important empire to ever exist and the most influential, because the amount of stuff that still lingers from Rome even to this day is kind of amazing in culture, society, language, numerals. Like, Rome was just built different and just one of the like I said, I think, me personally, it is the most influential empire to ever exist. And yeah, I mean, there's a reason everyone still talks about it and wants to be Rome, essentially, and how empires who came after, even during when Rome was still around, basically wanted to keep selling themselves as the new Rome, right? And yeah, just so influential and so powerful. Yes, the Age of Kings of Rome. I think they had like 12 kings. 10 to 12. It's around that number, I'm pretty sure. But, yeah, it wasn't too long lasting in the grand scheme of things. But it is interesting that, the kingship and, monarchies were kind of the norm, especially back then. And the Romans were so unique in that they got rid of that pretty quick in their history and, resorted to their republic. So I don't know, that kind of is a unique aspect that helped them stand out, especially in, their earlier days, especially from the rest of the world.
What is Rome? A city on 7 hills, capital of Italy. But that is today. And 2,000 years ago, there it is. Another 1,000 years ago, there. A tiny tribal settlement of the Latins by the river Tiber. How did this manage to conquer the world? First,
You know what I find interesting? The mythological aspect of the Romans. Like, in terms of mythology, they claimed that they descended from the Trojans, after the sack of Troy, and then the Trojan hero Aeneas was prophesied to found a new city, and that he's like the ancestors of the Romans, and he was a demigod son of Venus or Aphrodite, and so eventually that's kind of it. And then the founding of the city itself was between Romulus and Remus, where one brother killed the other, and that founded Rome. I think it was Romulus who did the killing. So like their origins are kind of built on war and kind of murder in that sense, and it makes sense considering how warlike the rise of Rome were. Like, they were You know, I don't know. I just find that aspect very interesting.
It was lucky with its neighbors. To the north, the Etruscans of modern Tuscany, a mysterious people whose language has never been fully deciphered. To the south, Greek colonies. These peoples all traded with each other. It was at the crossroads of their trade routes that Rome appeared. From the very start, Rome has been an open city, a safe haven for outcasts, murderers, runaway slaves. Rome offered migrants a unique opportunity to become fully fledged citizens. This will make Rome the largest metropolitan city of the ancient world.
Yeah, that's another unique aspect of the Romans, how they kept kind of absorbing people, even people they conquered. They were so incredibly good at integrating people. The famous Roman manpower that they used to have, where they could just raise new armies, a lot of Italy, when they took the Italian peninsula, was, you know, not Roman. They were, you know, Samites and rivals, yet, you know, a few centuries after the conquest, they could easily rally them into their armies and essentially build a manpower system that was insane for most of their early history. And, again, they were just really good at kind of bringing people in, obviously through the citizenship and whatnot. They were just so good at integrating people, even people that they fought with and conquered, into the Roman sphere, the Roman identity with citizenship and whatnot. You know, it's wild. I think there was a time where you would start from Britain and walk all the way to Syria, and you would still be in technically one empire, and you could still call yourself Roman on each side. So, I don't know, like that's kind of such a wild thing to think about, right?
The Romans themselves believed they were descendants of refugees from the Middle East who had survived the Trojan War. Romulus and Remus were the great-grandchildren of the Trojan hero Aeneas. Nursed by an Italian she-wolf, the brothers quarreled where to site the future world capital. Romulus killed Remus, gave his name to the city, and became its first ruler. As legend has it, there were 7 kings, each of which enjoyed a lengthy reign and left some...
Dang it, 7? I was so confident it was either 10 or 12. Never mind. Never mind. I'm upset. I could have sworn. Dang it.
beneficial legacy, a calendar, a sewer system, or the Capitolium, a temple to the senior god Jupiter. Much of what the Romans later became famous for, aqueducts, bridges, perhaps even the gladiatorial games, were borrowed from the Etruscans. This people had invented the Latin alphabet by adapting the Greek.
I did not know that. I thought those concepts are so Roman that I didn't know that they... I mean, it kind of makes sense when you think about it, because the Romans were really good at kind of... not just in warfare, like when it came to war, the Romans were good at just taking from other people and using it for themselves. Like, the biggest example would be the Carthaginians. Before the... I mean, even during the early parts of the First Punic War, the Romans didn't have a navy. They were, like, mainly land relegated. Eventually, they found a Carthaginian ship, literally copied it, and then created their own navy, which outdid the Carthaginians in battle. So the Romans were great at adapting. That was one of their greatest strengths, and, you know, taking the best of their enemy and using it. And... That goes to show that wasn't just in warfare, but in culture. I mean, you think of the Greek culture. Though Rome conquered Greece, the famous saying is that Greece conquered the heart of the Romans. And because a lot of Roman culture was kind of borrowed from the Greeks. So, yeah, that kind of goes to show. But I did not know that those stuff like aqueducts and the gladiator games were taken. Dang, that's really interesting.
Letters for their own needs. It's not surprising that their last kings were Etruscan. Rome borrowed her military and government organization from them, while maintaining her stern patriarchal simplicity. In 509, Rome was shaken by a sex scandal. The son of King Tarquin the Proud raped the chaste Lucretia. Tarquin was expelled, making him the last king of Rome. The Romans decided to prevent any such concentration of power ever again. From 509 onwards, they elected 2 consuls to serve a year apiece, instead of a monarch. The consuls were controlled by the Senate. This consisted of 300 fathers, patres in Latin, hence the term patricians. Those not so lucky to be born into the right families joined the plebs. Even if they were as rich as patricians, they were not entitled to take up positions in the state. It is in the 200-year struggle for these rights that the Republic, literally meaning public thing, will be formed. The plebeians would make up the backbone of the army, and to have their own way, they would threaten the fledgling state with emigration to a neighboring hill. Each time, the scared patricians caved in, introducing, for instance, the special position of a representative or tribune of the plebeians. These had the right to veto any decisions of the consuls. One of the main achievements of the struggle was the publication of the first written laws. By 287 BC, the plebeians had achieved complete equality of rights with the patricians. The unity of Rome found its best expression in the formula Senatus Populusque Romanus, the Senate and the Roman people, which still adorns the manhole covers in Rome.
That is awesome.
In 390 BC, the history of Rome could have come to an end. The city was unexpectedly taken by the Gauls. The guard dogs had sensed no danger, for which they would be crucified every year since. Peace awoke the last protectors of the Capitoline Hill fortress instead, saving Rome from complete destruction. The shaken Romans conducted a military reform. The Roman legion was divided into manipuli, making it more mobile in battle. The Roman army spent the next 100 years in constant...
Yeah, that was interesting, the manipul system. Originally, the Romans used the phalanx, you know, and they eventually kind of, again, we know about the more famous manipul system, which was more effective, especially in the terrain of Italy. The phalanx wasn't... It eventually kind of became a more of a burden than a advantage. So the manipul system was definitely more flexible and more effective for the Romans. And to circle back to the king stuff, I remember when we covered Historia Civilis Rome videos, that even though that the king, you know, had a lot of power, that the king could still be elected, and I think even removed. Like, it's an interesting system that, you know, even, like, the king had some checks and balances. It wasn't completely absolute. At least that's what I'm remembering from the Historia Civilis video about the Roman monarchy and election system. So, I don't know. It's been like a year since we looked at it, but I could remember something like that.
Wars. Instead of simply imposing a tribute on the conquered, the Romans would enter into a treaty of alliance with them, and the loyal allies supply Rome with a never-ending stream of recruits. Thanks to this, the Roman legions were able to stand their ground in battle with the most efficient fighting force of the time, the all-conquering Macedonian phalanx, led by Pyrrhus, a relative of Alexander the...
Yeah, I think Pyrrhus was his cousin, the cousin of Alexander. And again, like I was saying earlier, the Romans were so good at implementing people into their system that it essentially allowed them to have infinite manpower. Because early Rome is really defined by its manpower. They would lose, you know, a battle, but then immediately rebuild an army. They would lose armies and immediately keep rebuilding and rebuilding, and basically like almost a hydra. Like, you cut off its head and it'll grow a new one. That's kind of early Rome, when they had the manpower cheat activated for their game, you know? And I think Pyrrhus is a great example, because I think the way the Roman way of war and the Greek way of war was so different in terms of mindset. The Greeks would... I said, like, warfare for the Greeks was a lot more sportsmanship-like, at least for the Greeks, and, you know, if you win a decisive battle or two, you could probably impose or get a favorable peace term, while the Romans, when they fought a war, was like, we fight until the very end. We will win, or we will die. There is no peace anymore. And, again, Pyrrhus defeated them once, and then he tried to make a peace agreement with them. I think the Romans considered it for a bit, but then they were like, yeah, no, and then they proceeded to just build another army and Pyrrhus fought, and again, we get the term Pyrrhic victory because, yeah, Pyrrhus, essentially realized that they just had infinite manpower, and in comparison, he was losing men that he couldn't fully replace. So, and it was an early example, because again, the Macedonian phalanx ruled the world. This was a little bit past Alexander, and all the great successor kingdoms of the world, the Ptolemies of Egypt, the Seleucid Empire, the Macedonians, and Pyrrhus of Epirus used Alexander's tactics and tried to implement them, and the Romans found a way to even give a great fight and really push the phalanx back, and this was in really early Rome, so yeah, I don't know. I'm very interested in Pyrrhus of Epirus. He's a figure that I read all of Plutarch's entire retelling of his life a few times, and his war with Rome is very interesting, you know?
Great. The last stronghold of resistance in Italy, the Greek city of Tarentum, then hired the most costly and celebrated contemporary warlord of the time to defend against Roman expansion. Having conquered Tarentum and reached Sicily, Rome now had to take on a much more dangerous adversary, Carthage, lord of the Mediterranean. The Romans called the Phoenicians of Carthage Punics, hence the Punic.
Yes, my boy, Hannibal Barca. I love Hannibal Barca. He's my favorite military commander of all time. And he gave Rome some of their biggest L's, like the Battle of Cannae, say no more. You know? And despite killing over 100,000 Romans, Hannibal just couldn't put them... Like, the Romans, again, the mindset is, we don't surrender, we don't make peace, we keep fighting until there's literally no Romans left, and so you can't, that's what made them so terrifying, you can't make peace with them, an enemy that can keep replenishing its defeated or destroyed armies, and essentially will defeat you in a war of attrition. So not even one of the greatest generals of all time could put the Roman war system down, which is amazing, you know?
Wars. They were fought over the next 100 years. In 149 BC, Rome had taken the greater part of Punic territory and that of their allies, but after each defeat, the trading power of Carthage would rapidly recover. Senator Cato the Elder began to finish every speech with the same refrain: Carthage must be destroyed, and so it was done. The city was wiped out, all of its population was enslaved, allegedly plowing salt into the earth as an eternal curse. Also in 146 BC, the Romans wiped out another city, Corinth, making Greece and Macedonia Roman provinces. Rome appropriated the colossal riches of the disintegrating empire of Alexander, but the patriarchal simplicity of Rome succumbed to the sophisticated Greek culture. Greek became, in effect, a second state language. The Roman nobility busied itself learning new words, hexameter.
Yeah, like, you know, Greek culture, kind of ended up dominating the Romans, even at the end. Like, you think of the Byzantines, and they were kind of regulated to just the Balkans, and, you know, the Macedonian dynasty. The Romans kind of became Greekified, you know, and you do see it through here, like, though they conquered Greece, Greece conquered the heart of the Romans. Yeah.
History, rhetoric. Cicero, the most famed orator of Rome, would come to model his speeches on those of the Greek Demosthenes. However, across this immense territory, full rights were only afforded to the Romans themselves. Even other Italians, the majority of the military, had no citizenship rights. These would demand equality, declare war, and win the right to take part in managing the state. This was a total game changer. While ancient Greece remained a collection of squabbling city-states, Rome gradually extended citizenship rights to the conquered, laying down the basis for an empire. Having conquered half the world, Rome fell victim to globalization. Cheap grain and an inflow of unpaid slave labor bankrupted the small farmers. These rushed into the cities and joined the ranks of the proletariat, those who have nothing to lose except their own offspring. At the same time, the rich grew 100 times richer, having bought land from the ruined peasants for a song. Previously united, the Senate and the Roman people split into two hostile camps. The tribunes of the people, the Gracchi brothers, would try to reconcile them. They proposed granting excess public lands to the impoverished peasants and suggested free distributions of bread to the poor. The disgruntled senators decided to suppress the Gracchi movement by force, killing the brothers and several thousand of their allies. Rome was gripped by civil wars.
My goodness.
Social mobility for the proletariat was offered by Gaius.
And, they would never end, those civil wars. You know, early Rome was very rigid, but like in an honorable way. In war and in conduct. You know, basically, we won't, like one episode where Pyrrhus of Epirus, one of his physicians, offered the Romans an opportunity, hey, I'll kill Pyrrhus if you, like, you know, reward me or something. And I think the Roman consul or general basically just told Pyrrhus, oh, you have someone, like, plotting against you. Like, we didn't accept the offer because, we want to beat you fair and square. That is a far cry from the Romans of later time, who were very court intrigued and were not above backstabbing people or committing assassinations. And it really is after the conquest of Greece, or during it, that transition happens. When we covered that series by Kings and Generals, the Roman conquest of Greece, the Romans lost that old, honorable, honest way of doing things, and then they just relied on trickery and, you know, basically doing whatever it took to get ahead in very underhanded ways. You know, I used to joke, like, yeah, the Greeks really did influence the Romans, even had them fighting each other, because the Greeks were known to always squabble and fight, and once the civil wars for Rome started, Rome kind of fell into the exact same trend as the Greeks, usually kind of just fighting each other, like, just constantly turning on each other, generals killing their emperors, the Praetorian Guard, and then declaring themselves emperor. Like, yeah, the old ways of the Romans kind of being more honorable brutes just kind of went away, you know? And the civil wars basically would never end. You know, from the beginning here all the way until the very end, the Romans were having nothing but civil wars and screwing each other over more than any enemy could, in many ways, you know?
Marius, a popular general. He began enrolling the proletariat into the army with a promise of a grant of land at the end of service. This would make the legions personally devoted to their generals. In 49 BC, two outstanding generals fought over Rome. Cnaeus Pompeius had won the eastern provinces for Rome, including restless Judea, cleared the Mediterranean of piracy, defeated Spartacus' slave revolt, and justifiably added the title Great to his name. Gaius Julius Caesar had conquered Gaul. Nowadays, they would call it genocide. He butchered 1 million Gauls and enslaved as many more. He went on to defeat the Germans and then invaded Britain. According to the law, a general had to dismiss his legions before returning to Rome, and in return have his moment of glory, a triumphal entry into the capital to the applause of the citizens. Caesar performed a hitherto unseen maneuver. He refused to submit to the Senate, and having crossed the Italian border, the river Rubicon, marched his legions to Rome. It would take...
Yeah, Julius Caesar was insane. When we covered the story of him by Kings and Generals, that series, Julius Caesar was amazing. And obviously Pompey, also amazing. Though I don't think it was him who destroyed Spartacus. I'm pretty sure it was the third triumvirate member. I keep forgetting his name. Julius Caesar, Pompey, and what, Crassus? Crassus? Wait, I need to Google this really quick. Okay, first, Virit. Okay, so let's see. Crassus. Okay, yes. I think it was Crassus who did it, but, or at least usually is given more credit. I don't know. I could be wrong about that. Don't quote me, please.
Him several years to defeat Pompey the Great and his other rivals, pitting Roman legions against each other. In the process, Caesar annexed new territories and gave Cleopatra the Egyptian throne. After a romantic cruise along the Nile, she would give birth to Caesarion, or Little Caesar. On his return, Caesar would add Imperator, or Emperor, to his name, title originally meaning victorious commander, and gain control of all political positions: consul, tribune of the people, and dictator. Rumor spread that Caesar wanted to declare himself king. Conspiracy was brewing in the Senate, and Caesar was assassinated. Caesar left his wealth, quite unexpectedly for all concerned, to his grandnephew, 19-year-old Gaius Octavius.
Heck yeah.
This Octavian immediately...
So, I have a very interesting history with Gaius Octavius. I'm saying that like I knew the guy. What I mean is, I remember in 5th grade was the first time I ever had to do like a report on a historical figure. And for some reason, I chose Augustus, Octavian, Caesar. I know some people are sticklers, like, oh, Octavian, Augustus. I call him Augustus, okay? I use his later, you know, title. It's the one I prefer to use, though I do know, obviously, before that, he was called Octavian. Just so we're clear about that, because some people are kind of sticklers for that, but, you know, I did my report on him, and then, like, many years later, around my sophomore year of high school, when I had to do another report of the similar vein, I did it on him, and I remember studying about him and his early... using Wikipedia back in, like, ancient Wikipedia, but yeah, Wikipedia when I was in 5th grade to learn about the dude. Great times, and he is my favorite Roman emperor, in my opinion. The best Roman emperor, and you know, that's just my opinion, and that's a fact that has never changed, despite how much we've learned about so many other Roman emperors. Augustus remains #1. I think he's just the greatest politician to ever exist, you know? And he really got the ball rolling for the empire, or at least the transition from republic to empire, you know?
Immediately joined in the power struggle. In 31 BC, he defeated his last rival, the warlord Mark Antony, who likewise had an affair with Cleopatra. The lovers would take their own lives. Octavian was left sole ruler of a vast territory. Julius Caesar ruled for 4 years. Octavian, assuming the title Augustus, meaning the Venerable or the Great, ruled for an endless 43 years. He didn't formally abolish the Republic, he simply took control of all possible positions, making his power almost absolute. But he
yeah, that's the thing. There was a pretext for that this was still kind of the Republic. Like, I know when we think of Emperor, right? We think of, like, he has all the power, and I mean, he did. But, and, you know, everyone bows to him and whatnot, and, you know, kind of like absolute monarch. But Augustus played a more shrewd game. He had an image of being very humble, in a sense. You know, the first citizen of Rome, and, you know, he kept the Senate around, and kind of the pretext that this wasn't a monarchy, but, you know, just kind of the restoration of the Republic. Though obviously we know it wasn't that. It was, he had all the power, he was the emperor. Though I don't even think they used the term emperor the way we think of it and use it. Obviously Augustus was more shrewd. It wasn't until Diocletian, long after this Augustus, that he finally broke down the pretext of, okay, I am a monarch. like Diocletian and his rule of what was it called? The rule of what? No, not the rule of one. That's Star Wars. His absolute rule, the dominant. Yeah, his rule of domination. That's when they kind of dropped the pretext of, okay, guys, let's be honest. I'm an emperor. I'm royalty. I'm a monarch. You answer to me. Diocletian just kind of broke down the the facade that the emperor was more humble than he really was, but that Augustus started. But in practice, obviously, Augustus was basically had all the power. And yeah.
They called themselves Princeps, the first senator. And even though skirmishes with barbarians continued along the borders, inside them the period of Pax Romana set in, a period of peace and stability that was to last 200 years. The empire experienced an economic upswing. Bread was distributed for free to 200,000 people. On Augustus' orders, a 500-meter basin was dug at the very center of the capital, where 3,000 gladiators mimicked sea battles on real seagoing vessels. In Rome,
yeah, the gladiator games were awesome. Especially the ones where they would just flood the arena and just have people make mock battles. Like, that's just amazing. That's just really cool. I mean, bloody, obviously. I think by our modern sensibilities, we're like, oh, barbaric and stuff for sure, you know? But, yeah, I don't know. It's still quite the spectacle, right?
Construction was booming. Concrete and multi-story districts were growing. Augustus had to introduce height regulations, limiting skyscrapers to 6 floors. And still the citizens were unhappy. They complained about traffic jams, pollution of the waters of the Tiber, and high rents. The golden century of poetry dawned. Maecenas, a quasi-minister of culture, allocated special grants to praise the value of the state. Temples would be built in the honor of Augustus, and even a month was named after him. Thus, the cult of the Roman emperors was emerging. They would come to be venerated alongside Mars and Jupiter. After Augustus' power became hereditary, the senatorial opposition has left us vivid portraits of the first emperors. Suspicious Tiberius unleashed terror under the pretext of the law on treason. Under this law, any action could be deemed offensive. It was enough not to sufficiently praise the emperor or pay at a brothel with coins bearing his portrait. In distant Judea, a preacher refusing to worship the emperor as God was crucified. Caligula wanted to make his horse a consul. A scholar and gourmet, Claudius, was too occupied with feasting and the reforming of the alphabet to keep an eye on court intrigue. One of his wives, Messalina, was giving women of easy virtue a run for their money in the brothels. And the other, Agrippina, poisoned Claudius with mushrooms to enthrone her son from another marriage, Nero.
Yeah, this is the Julian Claudian dynasty, and quite frankly, what a mess. You ever see the Julian Claudian dynasty family tree? You will have a headache, I'm sure. I did. But yeah, I have to say, Augustus, greatest emperor. Tiberius, I think in the long run, in the grand scheme of things, I wouldn't call him a bad emperor, actually. Like, you know, at the end, you know, he had to follow up Augustus, which is like, it's like when you watch those talent shows and then someone nails it and then you have to follow up like a star-stealing performance with playing the kazoo or something, you know? So overall, I think the treasury and the economy of Rome was still full after Tiberius, so I don't think he... I mean, there is the Sergianus incident and stuff, but in the grand scheme of things, he didn't mess it up, so I wouldn't call him an awful or even a bad emperor, in the grand scheme of things. Claudius was good, and then you get to, like, Nero and Caligula, which, were huge messes, so, yeah. Yeah.
Nero, believing that he was a born actor, not an emperor, would later kill his own mother, and then allegedly the apostles Peter and Paul. Then he again, allegedly, set fire to Rome, so as to read the verses on the fall of Troy during the blaze. He would accuse the first Christians of arson, and initiated their persecution. And finally, he took his own life. Most details of this era are known from Tacitus, a historian and senator who observed the degradation of republican institutions. Fate of the empire was now decided not so much by the Senate as by the Praetorian Guards, the emperor's personal security force, created
Wait.
back in the times of Augustus. These suffocated
Yeah, the Praetorian Guards suck. They're like one of the worst bodyguard groups. I think they're the worst bodyguard groups to ever exist in human history. The amount of emperors that they murdered is kind of insane. Like, definitely they killed some bad ones like Caligula and stuff, but like they also murdered some pretty good ones like Aurelian. The Praetorian Guard existed for way too long and was way too powerful for too long, essentially killing emperors and even at one point selling the throne of Rome. Like, here, have the most powerful seat in the world, just give us money. Like, insane when you think about it. Like, what the heck? Yeah, I hate the Praetorian Guard, they suck.
Tiberius with a cushion, slayed Caligula by the sword, and hailed Claudius emperor. In all fairness, at the same time, the empire grew, expanding into new territories. Roman legions conquered part of Britain, where they founded a town called Londinium. Provinces were given a transparent taxation system, and the non-Roman nobility began to enter the Senate en masse. A grandchild of an Italian peasant, Vespasian Flavius would become the founder of the next dynasty. Vespasian and Titus, suppressing the uprising in Judea, committed genocide, again according to modern-day, not Roman standards, and reduced the Temple of Jerusalem to nothing but the Wailing Wall. On a lighter note, Vespasian had a jolly good Roman predisposition. He taxed the collectors of urine at the public toilets. And Titus, the destroyer of Jerusalem, would nevertheless obtain the title of Merciful. After a splendid triumph, he opened the Colosseum for the people. Titus would be called the love and consolation of humankind. And after such festivities had depleted the public treasury, Vesuvius destroyed Pompeii, plague devastated half Italy, and Titus became a god. The 2nd century would go down in history as the era of the good emperors.
Yeah, the 5 good emperors of Rome. This is kind of like the peak of the empire, where everything was just great and they had all these great guys. Trajan got the Romans to like their height in terms of territorial expansion. And I don't know, like a really great emperor.
Trajan was considered by his contemporaries the best emperor ever. Rome became a million-strong city, and the empire reached its largest.
Yeah, the Roman emperors, I think after Trajan, there was a saying with emperors, right? May you be as lucky as Augustus, and better, or was it better than Trajan? Something like that. So yeah, it goes to show you just how revered he was after his reign.
Extent. Rome connected her new territories via a network of paved roads. This system still determines the transport map of Europe. After Trajan's conquest, Hadrian busied himself with defense, erecting massive fortifications in Britain and between the Rhine and the Danube. Pantheon was built in Rome, the first temple to be topped by a massive dome, a real architectural sensation of the day, dedicated to all the gods.
Wow.
Hadrian would also include his lover among them, the young Antinius. More of his images have survived than of any Roman.
Dang.
The last good emperor, the throned philosopher, Marcus Aurelius, would spend most of his reign on military expeditions. In between battles, he wrote his manifesto for Stoic philosophy, Meditations.
I remember when I tried being stoic for a bit many years ago and was reading a lot of Marcus Aurelius quotes and trying to basically make my life like that. I don't know. That was something I was trying to do like back in middle school and like when I was, you know, a little bit before preteen and during my teen years. I'm sorry, I just laugh when I think about that. It's like it didn't stick in, as you see, in the long run, but it is something I try to do.
It was under Marcus Aurelius' son, Commodus, that the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, came to an end. He preferred a gladiator's glory to the affairs of state. Conspirators had the emperor strangled by a fellow fighter. The slave...
Yeah, he essentially got, like, strangled by his teacher, right? That's like the equivalent of being strangled by your, like, PE coach or teacher. Like... I'm sorry, I was just thinking about that. That's hilarious. Yeah, Commodus, in the in the Gladiator movie actually had a much more interesting arc. Real life Commodus was just weirder. Um, Basically fought in the arena so many times. A lot of the battles were said to be rigged, like in his favor, and he basically just wanted to LARP and cosplay as a gladiator. And yeah.
Narcissus, Rome sank into chaos. The next 100 years brought a sequence of random emperors proclaimed by the army. Taking their turn on the throne were a liberated slave, a fortune seeker who bought the throne at an auction, General Punic descent who would place statues of the former enemy, Hannibal all over the empire, a Syrian priest of the sun, and a former shepherd who owed his popularity to his powerful physique. In 212, Emperor Caracalla...
Yeah, this is supposed to be the crisis of the 3rd century, or at least we're getting there, which is another insane era.
Half North African, half Syrian, granted Roman citizenship to nearly all free subjects of the empire. The idea that you could be a Roman in Judea, in Africa, or any other corner of the empire at all might well be the main legacy of Rome still in use today. By mid-century, Rome was already in the midst of such a crisis that the whole provinces were starting to split off. The Gauls, for instance, proclaimed an empire of their own. Order would be restored by the son of a liberated slave, Diocletian. Having started his career as a soldier, he would end up an absolute monarch, an astonishing example of social mobility.
Yeah, Diocletian. I do like Diocletian. Wait, before we get to him, yeah, the crisis of the 3rd century was insane. That that escalated the trend of generals just murdering their emperors and then winning one battle and thinking they should be emperor. Yeah, it's hilarious. A general will win one battle and be like, I should be the new emperor of Rome. Like, you won one battle. That happens so much. Until the very end of the Byzantine era. And, yeah, I think that's the thing, you know? There's so many people who claim to be the new Rome, and then Rome this, I'm the successor of Rome, people are still arguing about it. I guess a big part of it really was just the Roman identity was for everyone, in a sense, you know? You could be non-ethnically Italian or Roman or whatever their like original ethnicity was, and basically just be Roman, which is just really cool. That's identity, you know? Like for instance, I think like kind of like America here, in a sense. Like I'm not ethnic. I was born here in America, raised here in America, but you know, I did in terms of ethnicity, I'm Central American, so. I don't know, like, it's kind of cool how the Roman identity just kind of was up for grabs for anyone. But I think that's just a unique aspect of them, for sure.
Diocletian split the empire into 4, with 4 co-rulers and 4
Yeah, this was an awful idea, though. As much as I like Diocletian for his many reforms and his genius in that regard, the Tetrarchy was one of the worst things like ever, mainly because like one Roman Empire, you had to worry about everyone jumping for going for the grabs of emperor, right? And you know, all that. Here it's like, let's make 4 emperors in effect, like 2 main emperors and 2 minor emperors, you know, and all you did was just make like 3 more powerful people that if they don't get along could just create more civil war. Like, I like a lot of his reforms. I think Diocletian was definitely a very intelligent man, and some of his reforms were kind of amazing, but I think this was like such a huge mess, and this was like something I'd be like, dude, you really thought this was gonna work? Like, it worked when he was in charge, but when he decided to step down and tend to cabbages, everything fell apart. This system he created was only gonna ever work with him around. But yeah, in the hindsight, I think he was way too optimistic of the Romans, who at this point already had proven, especially in the 100 years, the crisis of the 3rd century, I mean, that they're not loyal, and that power grabbers are still not gonna just go away just because of this new system. Yeah, I have thoughts. I think it was a bad system, and probably one of the worst ideas he ever made, so yeah.
Capitals situated closer to the frontier. Rome lost its significance. The Senate became a town council. The country was now ruled by an army of officials personally reporting to the emperor. Thus, the ancient world, centered around the concept of a free community and free citizens, came to an end. From the princeps, the first senator, the emperor had become the dominus, a title by which slaves addressed their masters.
Yeah, that's what Diocletian did. He's like, let's just drop the pretext that you senators actually matter. You know? Okay, that was a bit mean, but what I mean is, obviously, the Senate did not have as much power as it did pre-Augustus, and a lot of it, especially in, like, Augustus's time, really, the Senate really kind of lost its prestige and real power, I feel, after Augustus. I mean, you know, during the rise of Augustus, and I just like that Diocletian did that. He was just like, call me the dominus, the dominant, the lord, I'm the monarch, treat me like one, like, you know. He just did away with the pretext, like, the charade of it, which is funny.
The citizen became a subject, the warrior turned into a soldier, and the farmer a semi-serf. Diocletian himself resigned from the post of emperor 20 years later and went off to his estate to grow cabbages.
Yeah, that's kind of base, though. I like that. He's like, time to go grow cabbages. Unfortunately, his tetrarchy or whatever led to things, and he killed himself when he found out. At least it's reported that he ended his own life or took it when he found out the mess of the civil wars that happened after he stepped down, so... Yep.
After Diocletian's departure, the co-rulers were fighting for power. Constantine, the future Saint Constantine the Great, emerging victorious. Before the crucial battle for Rome, he allegedly had a vision of a cross. After this, he made all religions equal. After 300 years of persecutions, the Christians came out of the catacombs and were now entitled to build churches alongside the temples of Augustus and Mars. Constantine would take the cross from Jerusalem to the new capital of the Roman Empire, Constantinople. Theodosius I would make Christianity the official religion and begin to destroy the ancient temples. He would also be the last emperor of a united Roman Empire. His sons split the empire into west and east. The eastern half would live another 1,000 years and is known to us as Byzantium. The western part would fall victim to the great migration of peoples. Rome, founded by migrants, would fall to the onslaught of a new wave of refugees. Ironically, the last ruler of Rome would be called Romulus.
Yeah, Romulus Augustus. He kind of had the name of the founder of the city and the first emperor, which is just poetic. A poetic final Western emperor, you know?
In modern Rome, not far from the Colosseum and the ruins of the Forum, there is a tomb. Its occupant was neither emperor nor senator, but a simple baker called Ulysses. Likely born a slave into a family of Greek migrants, he later entered into a bread supply contract with the capital and became so rich that he could build such a monument for himself and his wife. Before Rome, in ancient Egypt and elsewhere, or after Rome, during the Middle Ages, a man would die in the same station in life as he had been born in. The life and career of Ulysses is an answer to the question of how Rome was able to create a global state that lasted over 1,000 years. Do you like our video?
Oh, snap. Alright, guys. So that's the end of the video. That was a really informative and great video that we watched. And yeah, tomorrow we'll be back for something else. Bye, everyone.